gentlemen, we have called you together to inform you that we are going to overthrow the United States government. Do you still think that jet fuel brought down the World Trade Center? Does anybody else see a problem here? If the government has nothing to hide, why are they so afraid to answer a few questions? This story does not add up.
The greatest form of control is where you think you're free when you're being fundamentally manipulated and dictated to. One form of dictatorship is being in a prison cell and you can see the bars and touch it. The other one is sitting in a prison cell but you can't see the bar, you think you're free. What the human race is suffering from is mass hypnosis. We are being hypnotized by people like this. Newsreaders, politicians, teachers, lecturers. We are in a country and in a world that is being run by unbelievably sick people. The chasm between what we're told is going on and what is really going on is absolutely enormous.
It's like we all know what's going down, but no one's saying shit what happened to the home of the brave. These motherfuckers, they controlling us now, and no one's talking about how they made us modern day slaves. And everybody's just walking around, head in the clouds, and wanna wake up to a dead in the grave. By then it's too late, we need to be ready to raise up. Welcome to the end of days.
Everybody is slaves, only some are aware that the government releasing poison in the air. That's the reason I collect so many guns in my lair. I ain't never caught slipping, never underprepared. Yeah, they shade sign army, they just spray it proudly. George Bush, the grandson of Alistair Crowley. They want you to believe the lie that the enemy Saudi. The enemy ain't Saudi, the enemy around me. It's fluoride in the water, but nobody know that. It's also a prominent ingredient in Prozac. For real? How could any government bestow that upon people who believe in political throwback? That's not all that I'm here to present you. I know about the Black Pope and Solomon's Temple. Yeah. About the Vatican assassins and how they will get you, and how they clone Barack Hussein Obama in a test tube.
It's like we all know what's going down, but no one's saying shit what happened to the home of the brave. These motherfuckers, they controlling us now, and no one's talking about how they made us modern day slaves. And everybody's just walking around, head in the clouds, and wanna wake up to a dead in the grave. By then it's too late, we need to be ready to raise up. Welcome to the end.
Whoever built the pyramids had knowledge of electrical power, and you know that that's the information that they suppress and devour. Who you think the motherfuckers that crashed in the tower? Who you think that made it turn into ash in an hour? The same ones that invaded your own, the ones that never told you about the skeletons on the moon. Yeah, the ones that poison all the food you consume, the ones that never told you about the Mount Vesuvius tombs. The bird flu is a lie, the swine flu is a lie. Why would that even come as a surprise? Yeah, the polio vaccine made you die. It caused cancer and it cost a lot of people their lives. Do y'all know about Bohemian Grove? How the world leaders sacrificing children in robes? Lucifer is God in the public school system. I suggest you open up your ears and you listen.
It's like we all know what's going down, but no one's saying shit what happened to the home of the brave. These motherfuckers, they controlling us now, and no one's talking about how they made us modern day slaves. And everybody's just walking around, head in the clouds, and wanna wake up to a dead in the grave. By then it's too late, we need to be ready to raise up. Welcome to the end of days.
The greatest hypnotist on planet Earth is a oblong box in the corner of the room. It is constantly telling us what to believe is real. If you can persuade people that what they see with their eyes is what there is to see, you don't. Because they'll laugh in the face of an explanation that portrays the bigger picture of what's happening. And they have.
Bush, he was a Nazi, that was why he went to war. Obama, he is just like him, a Bilderberg for sure. All their money and their wealth was stolen from a dead man's grave. A bunch of Nazi pigs they are, just study and be brave. Hitler, he was just a puppet for the New World Order. His ideas were never really his. Bush and Obama, it's the same side of the story. Will we ever learn our lessons? Will we ever free ourselves?
Let's go now to this interview with Rudy Dent, 9/11 firefighter, blows WTC cover-up wide open.
I'm Leanne McAdoo with Infowars.com, reporting here from Times Square. I am standing next to Rudy Dent. He's a 32-year veteran of the New York City Fire Department. He's worked as well with the New York City Police Department. And you retired right after 9/11. He was there on 9/11. He saw World Trade Center Tower 7 come down. Rudy, tell us about what happened that day.
Well, I was off that day, and I received a call at home, and I got to see both buildings come down on TV. I jumped on my motorcycle. I did about 120 miles an hour across the Tappan Zee. I reported to my firehouse, and then I got my gear. A bunch of us got together. We commandeered a mail truck, and we made our way down to the site. At that time, Building 7 was still up. I saw Building 7 come down. My fellow firefighters who were there, they did that involuntary jerk when a loud explosion goes off. You know, you can't help it, and they did. I'm a Vietnam veteran too, so I kind of didn't jump like they did, but there was an explosion. The building did come down in complete classical controlled demolition. It came down on its own footprint. There's no question about that. As a matter of fact, Richard Gage from Architects and Engineers has completely handled that from his area of expertise. Okay.
Now, we heard rumblings, things that the fire department was saying that they were overhearing Larry Silverstein talking to his insurance company of whether or not he should have the building pulled. In your professional opinion, was the building pulled?
Well, let me say this. In the New York City Fire Department, as I said, I had 32 years there. I was a chauffeur, and I was also a trained fire marshal. A fire marshal is considered an expert witness in court. He's like a forensic detective. He has the power to administer the oath, take testimony, and issue a subpoena. That's a lot of power. And he's a highly trained investigative person in his area of expertise, in arson. And we have no term that I know of that says pulling buildings. That's not our area of expertise. We've never done that. We don't do that. So for him to say that, I don't know where he pulled that out of, but it's just not part of our operations, okay?
Right, so the fire department doesn't have the training to pull a building, to demo a building like that.
We're not trained to do that. We've never done that in my 32 years. I know of no evolution whatsoever that does that.
And then talk to me a little bit, obviously, as a professional in the fire department for 30 plus years, they're saying that blaming it on office fires, just a few office fires.
Well, if it wasn't so serious a situation, that would be completely laughable. That is ridiculous. First of all, our guys were up there. They were calling for additional hand lines to mop up the isolated pockets of fire. And let me just explain one thing. Never in the history of the world, never in the history of high-rise skyscrapers has ever a skyscraper ever come down because of fire. And I'm talking massive fire. And you know the reason why? Because fire does not burn by itself hot enough to compromise and melt steel. What we had in the World Trade Center, and I saw myself, was molten lava-like pockets of molten steel. All right, I spent the night on the pile searching for bodies, and I saw that with my own eyes. So who are you going to believe? Are you going to believe a bunch of government bureaucrats or my fellow brothers, which I lost 343 guys that day? And I lost Tommy O'Hagan, Bruce Van Hines, and Kenny Kumpel. And I can never forget that. I think of that before I go to bed. I think about it the first thing in the morning when I wake up. And it's in honor of them and their family that I will continue to do everything I can to make the rest of the world wake up to the fact that this was a false flag operation.
Right. And now, as you're As you're out there with professionals who understand what it is that they're seeing, what were you all saying to each other when you're looking at this molten lava?
Well, we were overcome with grief. First of all, we lost 343 guys. We weren't talking about that. If you look at the numerous videos, you'll see the guys bent over in incredible grief. One of the things that we have in the fire department is an incredible brotherhood. We do what we do, an aggressive interior attack, because we believe in each other. We know that our guys will pull us out if we get into trouble. And if we lose somebody, we're family. We're very close. We know each other's families. We know each other's children. And one of the things that I've been privy to is I'm proud of is that the New York City Fire Department is a calling. It brings out the best in guys, in men who put their lives on the line to save other people's lives. New York City Fire Department is probably the least integrated of all the services, right? When I first came into the firehouse, it was all heavy brogues and stuff. But those same guys, I've seen them bent over giving mouth to little black children that they've just pulled out of a building. And typically when you die or when you cease to start to breathe, you throw up. And they gave them mouth to mouth. I've seen incredible acts of heroism. I love my fellow firefighters. We love each other. And I'm dedicated to exposing this false flag that took their lives.
Absolutely. What do your comrades say to you? What do people say to you? Because we've tried to talk to some people, and of course, they have to worry about their pension and things like that.
They cannot comment. And I'm retired. But while I was on, I was approached by the news, and I deferred from commenting for two reasons. First of all, I was at 1993, the first bombing, and I saw that. I stood shoulder to shoulder with the FBI while they foraged for little paint chips. And with their forensic science, they can take that paint chip and tell you the make and model of a vehicle that it belonged to. All right? And that was a bombing. This was a bombing.
What did you think about them taking all of the debris away so quickly?
That was a crime in and of itself, because the classical thing that any investigator is taught is protect the crime scene. And NIST and the 9/11 Commission lied to the public. I mean, you cannot be that stupid. You cannot be that stupid. In law, as a former police officer, every crime or offense has a degree of mental culpability. Either you knowingly, intentionally, recklessly, or negligently committed the act. And the mere fact that there were obviously the definition of a conspiracy is when two or more people acting in concert knowingly commit an offense or a crime, all right? A misdemeanor or a felony, an offense. That is the definition of a conspiracy. Was this a conspiracy? Absolutely. Yes, it was. And those people need to go to jail for treason.
Is there anything else that you want to say to anyone out there? Anyone who might be wanting to come forward but they're scared?
I want to thank you, because you're all we have. InfoWars, right? And independent press to try to get the word out to the public, because the public is mesmerized by the mainstream media. And let me give you my opinion of the mainstream media. The mainstream media is, their mission is to act as the most effective weapon of mass deception and public manipulation the world has ever seen. And if you don't think that's so, ask anyone any taboo question that the mainstream media frowns upon with its army of trusted celebrity prostitutes.
Right.
All right?
We've seen
and you will see a sadly predictable knee-jerk reactionary response from the public, because that's what they've been trained to believe and trust in.
Right.
All right?
Absolutely. Well, we are very glad that you took the time to speak with us to try and help break through that paradigm. We see, you know, here it is, it's very much like they live all around us with all this programming and just consistent programming with this ceremony. And we're just so thankful that people like you aren't afraid to speak out, aren't afraid to be laughed at, aren't afraid to be, you know, your friends say, what are you doing, man? Come on, you're maybe disrespectful.
You know, I think times are telling, because, as you know, my name is Rudy Dent. I did an interview with Ludowski, yeah. And that interview got over 51,000 views and still climbing. Right. It got over 1,500 likes. Yeah. And it only got 32 insults. Right. All right?
The people, that's not bad. They're ready for the truth. And they can think, you know, 13 years, people are going to forget. We will never forget. We remember. You remember
this. The founding fathers were up against impossible odds. They were up against King George III, upon whose holdings the sun never set. They were only 4%. And look what happened.
Absolutely. America.
Yep.
Thank you so much.
Okay. My pleasure.
Well, Leanne McAdoo reporting from Times Square, and there you have it. The people are ready for truth. It does not matter how many of these anniversaries go by. The truth will reveal itself in due time.
So are you ready for the truth out there? Are you ready to actually look at the way things happen, listen to what eyewitnesses have said, watch the video evidence, watch the news presentation from BBC where they're talking about the building 7 falling while they're standing in front of building 7 and it hasn't fallen yet? This is a crime. Can you imagine what the world would be like if we didn't have 9/11? If we weren't in these wars? It'd be a totally different place. Totally different. We wouldn't have the NSA, the TSA. We still have the NSA, but they wouldn't be as big. You wouldn't have Homeland Security. I mean, we wouldn't even be talking about Janet Napolitano and Jay Johnson and all these other people that want to leave the border open. It would be a different world. So joining us now, we have the nice young lady, Leanne McAdoo, Joe Biggs. They were there in New York covering the 14th anniversary. Guys, what are your impressions of what was going on in 9/11? People are awake now, and they're ready to accept the truth. Mm-hmm. Don't you think?
One of the craziest things I thought, you know, New York coined that phrase, never forget. There was a lot of people out there who forgot that 9/11 was going on.
Well, you saw them in that interview. They were walking back and forth looking for Batman to take pictures.
They want to take pictures with heroes because a hero to them is Superman, Spider-Man, something like that. Not a man like that who's willing to stand up against the grain and tell you the truth about what's really going on. That guy should have had 1 million pictures taken of him.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah, people should have been lined up saying, hey, you're a hero, you're speaking out. You're not concerned about your pension, and you have a story about that. You said a police officer came up to you. Tell us that story.
Yeah, right when we first got to right outside the ground zero area where they had a lot of the truthers blocked off to be able to, you know, talk and protest, I actually had a uniformed officer come up to me and he goes, hey, Joe Biggs, can I talk to you? And I'm sitting there first thinking like, all right, why does this cop know my name? And he's like, hey, I can't be on record right now. He's like, I'm 2 months away from retirement, but I'm going to tell you this. Is like, I was there. I saw an explosion at the bottom of the second tower before it happened. I saw debris shoot out right before everything happened. And he says, I guarantee you that planes did not just bring this down. He's like, this was a planned event.
And how many more out there are like him, but they're afraid to come forward because they're worried about their pension? Let me tell you, they take your pension anytime they want.
Right.
They're doing it in Detroit. They're taking everybody's got to take a haircut. That's what they call it. They call it a haircut when they steal money from you now. Right. So they're going to take your pension whether you speak up or not.
Well, anybody in the government, all these government agencies now, Border Patrol is scared to come out and talk about the truths that they see, actually seeing Korans and stuff at the border. They're afraid to speak to media because they're going to be threatened by the government, losing their jobs. They'll threaten them with, hey, your family's not going to have any money. Your kids aren't going to have the health care that we provide, all this stuff. It's crazy. The links are going to suppress these people from speaking out about what really happens all the time with this corrupt government.
Because they're afraid of the truth.
And
Go ahead,
initially, if Rudy or others would have spoken out, people they weren't ready to hear what they had to say. They would have immediately been ostracized. Now some time has passed and he is able to speak out. People are ready to hear the truth. They've had years and years and years of evidence presented to them. And that's one of the big issues that I have with people who just refuse to look at the evidence that they think they're so sophisticated, and everyone who's a quote-unquote truther, as if wanting the truth is a bad thing, should be, you know, a bad thing. But
well, they're under psychological trauma. They've been beaten with the images of the buildings collapsing and the planes hitting the towers over and over again for 14 years now. We're into 2 wars. We're about to go into Africa to help them out with Ebola.
United Nations wants to kill you. It's in the documents. History repeats itself. The evil never ends. Now let's all just march into a FEMA camp today. Please let me just load a pistol and blow my brains away. After all, that's what we are doing almost every day. When we use bisphenol A, that's making people gay. Mercury and aspartame, I know the name sounds lame, but after all that's said and done, it's making me insane.
Why are they so afraid to answer a few questions? This story does not add up.
They don't investigate themselves in this country. Those people, there would be a whitewash. It would be like the Kennedy thing. It would be like everything.
Jet fuel is 4/5 kerosene, which is not a hot burning fuel. And they want us to believe that it melted these steel structured girders.
Every time.
They want us to believe that it melted these steel structured girders. Want us to believe that it melted these steel structured girders.
Man, you hear this bullshit they be talking every day, man. It's like these motherfuckers is just like professional liars, you know what I'm saying? It's wild. Listen, Bin Laden didn't blow up the projects. It was you, nigga. Tell the truth, nigga. Bush knocked down the tower. Tell the truth, nigga. Bush knocked down the tower. Tell the truth, nigga. Bin Laden didn't blow up the projects. It was you, nigga. Tell the truth, nigga. Bush knocked down the tower. Tell the truth, nigga. Bush knocked down the tower.
I pledge no allegiance, nigga. Fuck the president's speeches. I'm baptized by America and covered in leeches. The dirty water that bleaches your soul and your facial features, drowning you in propaganda that they spit through the speakers. And if you speak about the evil that the government does, the Patriot Act to track you to the type of your blood. They try to frame you and say you was trying to sell drugs and throw a federal indictment on niggas to show you love. This shit is run by fake Christians, fake politicians. Look at their mansions and look at the conditions you live in. All they talk about is terrorism on television. They tell you to listen, but they don't really tell you their mission. They funded Al-Qaeda and now they blame the Muslim religion. Even though Bin Laden was a CIA tactician, they gave him billions of dollars and they funded his purpose. Fahrenheit 9/11, that's just scratching the surface.
Bin Laden didn't blow up the projects. It was you, nigga. Tell the truth, nigga. Bush knocked down the tower. Tell the truth, nigga. Bush knocked down the tower. Tell the truth, nigga. Bin Laden didn't blow up the projects. It was you, nigga. Tell the truth, nigga. Bush knocked down the tower. Tell the truth, nigga. Bush knocked down the tower.
They say the rebels in Iraq still fight for Saddam, but that's bullshit. I'll show you why it's totally wrong. Cause Cause if another country invaded the hood tonight, it'd be warfare through Harlem and Washington Heights. I wouldn't be fighting for Bush or white America's dream. I'd be fighting for my people's survival and self-esteem. I wouldn't fight for racist churches from the South, my nigga. I'd be fighting to keep the occupation out, my nigga. You ever clock someone who talk shit or look at you wrong? Imagine if they shot at you and was raping your moms. And of course Saddam Hussein had chemical weapons. We sold them that shit after Ronald Reagan's election. Mercenary contractors fighting a new era. Corporate military banking off the war on terror. They controlling the ghetto with the fear of attack, trying to distract the fact that they engineering the crack. So I'm strapped like Lee Malvo, holding a sniper rifle. These bullets will touch your kids, and I don't mean like Michael. Your body be sent to the morgue, stripped down and recycled. I fire on house niggas that support you and like you, cause innocent people get murdered in the struggle daily, and poor people never get shit and struggle daily. This ain't no alien conspiracy theory, this shit is real, written on a dollar underneath the Masonic seal.
I don't rap for dead presidents, I'd rather see the president dead. It's never been said, but I set precedents.
Bin Laden blow up the projects. It was yo, nigga. Tell the truth, nigga.
Bush knocked down the tower.
Tell the truth, nigga.
Bush knocked down the tower.
Tell the truth, nigga. Bin Laden blow up the projects. It was yo, nigga. Tell the truth,
City
nigga.
Records was 80 seconds away from the tower. Some cowards fought with the wrong building. They meant to hit ours. To hit ours. To hit ours. To hit ours.
On the morning of September 11, 2001, 19 men armed with box cutters, directed by a man on dialysis in a cave fortress halfway around the world using a satellite phone and a laptop, directed the most sophisticated penetration of the most heavily defended airspace in the world, overpowering the passengers and the military combat-trained pilots on 4 commercial aircraft before flying those planes wildly off course for over an hour without being molested by a single fighter interceptor. These 19 hijackers, devout religious fundamentalists who like to drink alcohol, snort cocaine, and live with pink-haired strippers, managed to knock down 3 buildings with 2 planes in New York. While in Washington, a pilot who couldn't handle a single-engine Cessna was able to fly a 757 in an 8,000-foot descending 270-degree corkscrew turn to come exactly level with the ground, hitting the Pentagon in the budget analyst office where DoD staffers were working on the mystery of the $2.3 trillion that Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld had announced missing from the Pentagon's coffers in a press conference the day before, on September 10th, 2001. Luckily, the news anchors knew who did it within minutes.
Osama bin Laden.
The pundits knew within hours.
Osama bin Laden.
The administration knew within the day.
Terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbor them.
And the evidence literally fell into the FBI's lap.
That a hijacker's passport was found blocks from the World Trade Center crash site, if you can believe that.
But for some reason, a bunch of crazy conspiracy theorists demanded an investigation into the greatest attack on American soil in history. That investigation was delayed, underfunded, set up to fail, a conflict of interest, and a cover-up from start to finish. It was based on testimony extracted through torture, the records of which were destroyed. It failed to mention the existence of WTC-7, Able Danger, PTEC, Sibel Edmonds, OBL and the CIA, and the drills of hijacked aircraft being flown into buildings that were being simulated at the precise same time that those events were actually happening. It was lied to by the Pentagon, the CIA, the Bush administration, and as for Bush and Cheney, well, no one knows what they told it because they testified in secret, off the record, not under oath, and behind closed doors. It didn't bother to look at who funded the attacks because that question is ultimately of little practical significance. Still, the 9/11 Commission did brilliantly answering all of the questions the public had, except most of the victims' family members' questions, and pinned blame on all the people responsible, although no one so much as lost their job, determining the attacks were
failure of imagination.
Because
nobody in our government, at least, and I don't think the prior government that could envision flying airplanes into buildings.
Except the Pentagon, FEMA, NORAD, and the NRO. The DIA destroyed 2.5 terabytes of data on Able Danger, but that's okay because it probably wasn't important. The SEC destroyed their records on the investigation into the insider trading before the attacks, but that's okay because destroying the records of the largest investigation in SEC history is just part of routine record keeping. NIST has classified the data that they used for their model of WTC-7's collapse, but that's okay because knowing how they made their model of the collapse would jeopardize public safety. The FBI has argued that all material related to their investigation of 9/11 should be kept secret from the public, but that's okay because the FBI probably has nothing to hide. This man never existed, nor is anything he had to say worthy of your attention, and if you say otherwise, you are a paranoid conspiracy theorist and deserve to be shunned by all of humanity. Likewise him, and her, and her, and her, and him. Osama bin Laden lived in a cave fortress in the hills of Afghanistan, but somehow got away. Then he was hiding out in Tora Bora, but somehow got away. Then he lived in Abbottabad for years, taunting the most comprehensive intelligence dragnet, employing the most sophisticated technology in the history of the world for a decade, releasing video after video with complete impunity and getting younger and younger as he did so, before finally being found in a daring SEAL team raid which wasn't recorded on video, in which he didn't resist or use his wife as a human shield, and in which these crack special forces operatives panicked and killed this unarmed man, supposedly the best source of intelligence about those dastardly terrorists on the entire planet. Then they dumped his body in the ocean before telling anyone about it. Then a couple dozen of that team's members died in a helicopter crash in Afghanistan. This is the story of 9/11, brought to you by the media which told you the hard truths about...
His head could be seen to move violently forward.
And...
They took the babies out of incubators.
And...
Mobile production facilities.
And...
The rescue of Jessica Lynch.
If you have any questions about this story, you are a batshit, paranoid, tinfoil, dog-abusing baby hater and will be reviled by everyone. If you love your country and or freedom, happiness, rainbows, rock and roll, puppy dogs, apple pie, and your grandma, you will never ever express doubts about any part of this story to anyone. Ever. This has been a public service announcement by the Friends of the FBI, CIA, NSA, DIA, SEC, MSM, White House, NIST, and the 9/11 Commission. Because ignorance is strength.
Fire department commander telling me that they were not sure they were going to be able to contain the fire. I said, you know, we've had such terrible loss of life. And this one thing to do is pull. And they made that decision to pull. And then we watched the building collapse.
Internationale forskere har fundet spor af sprængstoffer i ruinerne af World Trade Center. I en ny videnskabelig artikel får det forskerne til at konkludere, at det formentlig ikke var sammenstødende med de to kaprede fly, der i 2001 fik World Trade-tårnene til at kollapse. Så vender vi blikket imod 9/11, det store angreb i New York. Det var nemlig formentlig ikke sammenstødet med de to kaprede fly, der i 2001 fik de to tvillingetårne til at kollapse. Det konkluderer i hvert fald en netop offentliggjort videnskabelig artikel. Internationale forskere har gjort fund af sprængstoffet nanotermit i ruinerne af de sammenstyrtede tårne, og sprængstoffet kan ikke stamme fra de to fly. Tværtimod tyder undersøgelserne på, at det formentlig i forvejen var anbragt i bygningerne, og der er altså tale om flere tons sprængstof. Niels Harrit, du har sammen med 8 andre forskere lavet den her artikel, hvor I konkluderer, at det formentlig var stoffet nanotermit, som forårsagede sammenstyrtningerne af de her bygninger. Hvad er nanotermit for en størrelse?
At vi har fundet nanotermit i støvet fra sammenstyrtning af World Trade Center. Vi siger ikke, at der kun blev brugt nanotermit. Men nanotermit, hvis jeg skal forklare, hvad det er, så den sidste del af ordet termit, det er en gammel opfindelse faktisk fra 1893, som er en blanding af aluminium og pulveriseret rust, som hvis det reagerer med hinanden, udvikler en enorm varme. Der dannes i reaktionen jern, som er 2.500 grader varmt, og det kan man bruge til at svejse med, det har man gjort, det er meget nyttigt, men det kan også bruges til at smelte andet jern. Men i nanoteknologien, der bliver alting meget mindre. Så de her to pulver, som man lavede i 1893, er nu om dagen nogle bitte små partikler, som er blandet umådeligt godt med hinanden. Og det betyder, at når de reagerer, så udvikles denne her enorme varme meget hurtigere. Og samtidig kan man tilsætte andre stoffer, således at nanotermitter både kan virke som noget, der giver en masse varme, men det kan også virke som et meget effektivt sprængstof, Faktisk er der mere energi i nanotermitter, end der er i almindelige sprængstof og dynamit. Og man kan også bruge det som raketsprængstof, så det kan bruges til det hele.
Jeg var inde og google på nanotermit, og der er faktisk ikke skrevet så forfærdeligt meget om det. Er det et bredt anerkendt videnskabeligt stof, som man opererer med, eller er det så nyt, at det er næsten ukendt for mange andre fagfolk?
Altså, det er en samlet betegnelse for en masse materialer, energetiske materialer, der har energi. Og hvis der ikke er så mange, der kender det, så skyldes det måske, at civile forskere, som jeg, ikke beskæftiger sig normalt med sprængstoffer til hverdag. Og med hensyn til mine kolleger inden for det militære forskningsapparat, så må du hellere spørge dem, fordi jeg ved jo ikke, hvor meget de er på forkant med nanoteknologi.
Men altså, I har fundet det her stof i World Trade Center, og hvorfor mener I, at det har fået bygningerne til at kollapse?
Ja, det er jo sprængstof, og hvorfor skulle det ellers være der? Så, men
det er
Gentlemen, we have called you together to inform you that we are going to overthrow the United States government. You still think that jet fuel brought down the World Trade Center? Does anybody else see a problem here? If the government has nothing to hide, why are they so afraid to answer a few questions? This story does not add up.
Listen to me, listen to your
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The title of this report is A Satirist's Dream, Closing the Gap Between Anti-Corruption Law and Reality. I could fill my 60 seconds talking about the 18 years' worth of unaudited accounts, or the bazillions that are squandered on agriculture and foreign aid boondoggles, or the Tillack case where instead of any of the alleged fraudsters being arrested, it was the journalist trying to find out about them who found himself banged up by the police. I could talk about the £6.6 million spent last year by European commissioners simply on entertainment and luxury gifts and hotels. I could talk about the wonderful spectacle of President Van Rompuy and Commissioner Ashton flying to the same meeting in Russia in separate private jets, leaving Brussels within 4 hours of each other. Instead, I'll confine myself to saying this. These things happen not because the EU attracts particularly bad people. I mean, of course, it attracts some bad people. Man is fallen, and like all institutions, it contains those who give in to temptation. It happens rather because there is no link between taxation, representation and expenditure at Brussels level. It was Milton Friedman who said there's two kinds of money in the world. There's your money and there's my money. The trouble is that in the EU, it's all your money. Hence negligence, corruption, fraud, and what we see before us today.
Mr. Co-President Nigel Farage, Freedom and Democracy.
Well, good morning, Mr. Van Rompuy. You've been in office for 1 year, and in that time, the whole edifice is beginning to crumble. There's chaos. The money's running out. I should thank you. You should perhaps be the pin-up boy of the Eurosceptic movement. But just look around this chamber this morning. Just look at these faces. Look at the fear. Look at the anger. Poor old Barroso here looks like he's seen a ghost. You know, they're beginning to understand that the game is up, and yet in their desperation to preserve their dream, they want to remove any remaining traces of democracy from the system. And it's pretty clear that none of you have learned anything. You know, when you yourself, Mr. Van Rompuy, say that the euro has brought us stability, I suppose I could applaud you for having a sense of humour, but isn't this really just the bunker mentality? You know, your fanaticism is out in the open. You talked about the fact that it was a lie to believe that the nation state could exist in a 21st century globalised world. Well, that may be true in the case of Belgium, who haven't had a government for 6 months, but for the rest of us, right across every member state in this union, and perhaps this is why we see the fear in the faces, increasingly people are saying, we don't want that flag, we don't want the anthem, we don't want this political class, we want the whole thing consigned to the dustbin of history. And we had the Greek tragedy earlier on this year, and now we have the situation in Ireland. Now, I know that the stupidity and greed of Irish politicians has a lot to do with this. They should never ever have joined the euro. They suffered with low interest rates, a false boom and a massive bust. But look at your response to them. What they're being told, as their government's collapsing, is that it would be inappropriate for them to have a general election. In fact, Commissioner Wren here said they had to agree their budget first before they'd be allowed to have a general election. Just who the hell do you think you people are? You are very, very dangerous people indeed. Your obsession with creating this Euro state means that you're happy to destroy democracy. You appear to be happy for millions and millions of people to be unemployed and to be poor. Untold millions must suffer so that your Euro dream can continue. Well, it won't work, because it's Portugal next. With their debt levels of 325% of GDP, they're the next ones on the list, and after that, I suspect it'll be Spain. And the bailout for Spain would be 7 times the size of Ireland, and at that moment, all of the bailout money has gone. There won't be any more. But it's even more serious than economics, because if you rob people of their identity, if you rob them of their democracy, then all they are left with is nationalism and violence. I can only hope and pray that the Euro project is destroyed by the markets before that really happens.
Thank you.
They cannot create the world of Orwell. They have to manipulate us to create it. And what they're doing all the time, and a lot of this stuff in the movies, which are feeding you what they want to happen. Look at all the movies over the last, decade or so, more and more now all the time, that are portraying this very police state and this very Orwellian fascist Agenda 21 world that I've been talking about. They're doing that for a reason. It's to implant that in the subconscious so it becomes reality through humans' creative imagination. They have to get us to do it. Number one, the fascist global state is not coming because we're not fricking having it anymore. And we are not any longer going to be manipulated into manifesting our own enslavement. And when they tell us to be quiet, we shout bloody louder. Silence is consent. Can you hear us now? If you want to be free, then don't run and hide. This is a time for looking the world in the bloody eye. Together. Coming together. Strength does not come from physical capacity, it comes from indomitable will, Mahatma Gandhi. And that will says we are not having it anymore. Human race, get off your knees. What are you doing down there? Hey!
The whole enterprise is crazy, and it's an absolute scam which is going to cost you a great deal.
It's rather like paying monkeys, because what happens is the civil servants draw up the list, and if it's vote number 58 and the piece of paper says vote yes, you vote yes, and if it's number 59 and it says vote no, you vote no. It is an absolute farce. It is a complete sham masquerading as democracy.
What you're about to hear will both surprise and outrage you. It's the true story of Europe. It's the story the politicians don't want you to hear, because it shows how they've deceived us and betrayed our nation. Only in 1994 did Chancellor Kohl's foreign policy spokesman, speaking on behalf of the ruling party of Europe's dominant nation, Germany, clearly reveal the true plan. The plan is to create a federal European superstate. Into it will be merged up to 25 ancient European nations, including our own. This new country, called Europe, will have one parliament, one government, one court of justice, one currency, one flag, and one anthem. That has been the plan all along. But those who favoured it knew the people of Europe would never accept it. They would never willingly surrender their freedoms to become just a province in a vast European superstate. So what did the politicians do? They conspired to keep the truth from the people.
He also discusses with Hitler a new plan to unite Europe, not just under the conquering hammer of Blitzkrieg, but through a lasting political and economic union, which the Nazis named Europäische Wirtschaftsgemeinschaft, or the European Economic Community. In 1942, a conference is held in Berlin to discuss this political and economic integration of Europe. Of all the nations targeted, Britain has proved the wild card because she alone has successfully resisted invasion.
Anger and violence have spilled over onto the streets of Athens, with police using tear gas and water cannon against Greeks protesting draconian new budget cuts. Trump demonstrators hurled petrol bombs, with more than 100 detained as the country's parliament passed an austerity package aimed at securing the latest bailout. RT's Peter Oliver reports from Athens.
What we have seen, though, is anger on the streets of Athens. We saw a crowd of around 100,000 people gather in the square just behind me in front of the Parliament building. That quite quickly escalated into violent clashes between police and protesters. In a matter of seconds, downtown Athens went into essentially an urban war zone for a couple of hours. We saw Molotov cocktails thrown, flashbang grenades used, also tear gas used extensively again here in Athens as police tried to calm down protesters who are extremely unhappy by what they see as unfair measures being taken by the government. Now, also there was 100 people detained by police, 5 arrests made, and we're also hearing of injuries on both sides, both the police and demonstrators. The Greek people undoubtedly very unhappy about what's been signed into law. What's essentially happened is that politicians here in Greece have voted in order to allow the next round of austerity measures. 153 MPs voting in favour of these latest austerity measures, 128 against, and there were 18 abstentions. What these new austerity measures mean, though, for the Greek people is that we're going to see the retirement age rise to 67. There's also going to be slashes to pensions and wages, and there's also going to be new laws that's going to actually make it easier for employers to fire their staff. Now, all of this comes as Antonios Samaras, the Prime Minister, had to make 13.5 billion euro worth of savings. The reason he had to do that was it was demanded of him by Greece's 3 main lenders, the so-called Troika. Now, they had said that unless these cuts were made, that Greece wouldn't get its next round of bailout money. That's over 30 billion euros, and without that money, well, Greece was out of the euro essentially, and they would have faced a potentially devastating default. So that's what these new austerity measures mean. They've been signed into law. This is the future for the Greek people now.
The new austerity package is said to be the worst so far in 3 years of the Greek debt crisis. Journalist Charlie McGrath says the cuts will heap further suffering on ordinary people and that the situation won't change for the better until Greece acknowledges it's bankrupt.
We already have people killing themselves in front of Parliament in Greece. You have people that are losing everything, losing hope. The last thing to go, I think, is going to be, their sense that they have anybody representing them whatsoever. You have this tyranny of the technocrat majority inside Greece. 153 out of 300 vote more austerity onto the people. I think as they continue to lose all hope that they have any control of their own financial destiny whatsoever, how can it do anything but digress into potentially civil war? The financial health of the country is not going to change for the better until they realize that they are in default. They're bankrupt, and they tell the banks that are holding their debt and the European Union and the ECB and the Troika that they are going to default. This is what happens in free market capitalism. Their prospect for a return to a healthy economy, it has to start with them realizing that they are completely and utterly broke and start over from scratch.
Agenda 21, Sustainable Development, is the action plan. It is the blueprint to inventory and control all land, all water, all minerals, all plants, all animals, all construction, all means of production, all energy, all information, and all human beings in the world.
I get tired of saying that defense is to be made an excuse for wasting dollars. I don't believe we should pay 1 cent for defense more than we have to.
I seriously question an increase in the Pentagon budget in the face of the department's recent Inspector General's report. How can we seriously consider a $50 billion increase in the defense budget when DOD's own auditors say the department cannot account for $2.3 trillion in transactions in 1 year alone?
It is, I was going to say terrifying. It is such a monumental task. I have met with 2 former officials of the Pentagon who served in the budget and controller and those areas. And I've mused over the fact that I've read some of these things and asked what they thought.
We process nearly 10 million paychecks a month. 10 million times to get things screwed up. I've had my pay screwed up 6 times since I've been in the department. And it's really bad when you screw up your boss's pay.
I doubt, to be honest, that people inside the department are going to be capable of sorting this out. I have a feeling it's going to take some folks from outside to come in and look at this and put in place a process that over a period, and I regret to say, but I've seen how long things take. I think it's going to take a period of years to sort it out. I think it'll probably take the cooperation of the Congress to try to get the system so that you can actually manage the financial aspects of that institution rather than simply report on things that have happened imperfectly.
There's more oversight over the Head Start program than there is over the entire military budget.
It's a terrible record, and it's preposterous that the Defense Department doesn't know what's happened to this money.
This situation's a disgrace. It tells me that we can't meet our constitutional obligations to the taxpayers of our country to make sure that things are honestly and legally spent.
We're told major cuts in education programs, and then we read, well, you know, $500 million is paid per year that isn't owed.
It is an incredible thing that we arm the world and then turn around and come to Congress and say, look at all these weapons out there. They're almost superior to ours. They're comparable to ours. Well, of course they are. They're ours. We sold them to them.
Since the end of the Cold War, we've sold more military weapons than the rest of the world combined.
In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist.
My name is Jack Shanahan, Vice Admiral, U.S. Navy, retired. One of our nuclear bombs blows up Hiroshima 15 times over. 5 devastates Russia. After that, this is how many the U.S. has left. I feel safe reducing nuclear weapons. Do you?
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations. For the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations. When we are successful, and we will be, and we will be, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order. A real chance. An order in which a credible United Nations can use its peacekeeping role to fulfill the promise and vision of the UN's founders.
One of the great illusions is fear. No more fear. That's how we got into this situation. No more fear. No more fear, come on. If you can't laugh at insanity, you become insane. No more fear. Look at them. I wish it was a joke. It's not. It's real. Now, this is a wonderful quote. Martin Luther King, he had many, of course, but this is a fantastic quote. You may be 38 years old, as I happen to be, and one day some great opportunity stands before you and calls you to stand up for some great principle, some great issue, some great cause. And you refuse to do it because you are afraid. You refuse to do it because you want to live longer. You're afraid that you will lose your job, or you're afraid that you'll be criticized, or that you will lose your popularity, or you're afraid that someone will stab you or shoot you or bomb your house, so you refuse to take the stand. Well, you may go on and live until you are 90, but you're still just as dead at 38 as you would be at 90. And the cessation of breathing in your life is but the belated announcement of the earlier death of the spirit.
Gentlemen, we have called you together to inform you that we are going to overthrow the United States government.
Bush, he was a Nazi, that was why he went to war. Obama, he is just like him, a Bilderberg for sure. All their money and their wealth was stolen from a dead man's grave. A bunch of Nazi pigs they are, just study and be brave. Hitler, he was just a puppet for the New World Order. His ideas were never really his. Bush and Obama, it's the same side of the story. Will we ever learn our lessons? Will we ever free ourselves? United Nations wants to kill you. It's in the documents. History repeats itself. The evil never ends. Now let's all just march into a FEMA camp today. Please let me just load a pistol and blow my brains away. After all, that's what we are doing almost every day. When we use bisphenol A, that's making people gay. Mercury and aspartame, I know the name sounds lame, but after all that's said and done, it's making me insane.